Hello, my fabulous Lumineers. It's your host, Enchanted Kim, back with a new episode of Kim's Quarter. On today's episode, I'm giving you my ultimate guide to slay at the top tables for your Attack of the Vine pre release events. After filming a couple videos with my friend Heath, doing well at sealed events locally, and getting a bunch of questions last pre release weekend on how to play limited formats, I figured it was finally time to make my own limited guide video, but of course with my girly pop spice. So this video is definitely for the Illumineers who are playing limited for the first time, or Illumineers who are looking for a little extra guidance going into this weekend. So what even is pre-release and sealed? Pre-release is genuinely one of my absolute favorite times in Disney Lorcana. A week before a new set releases in retail stores globally, local game stores have the ability to sell the new set early and host tournaments where Lumineers can play limited formats such as sealed, draft, and pack rush. These events are so fun because there's a ton of excitement when opening all the packs and seeing what you pull, and then of course you get the opportunity to be creative with your deck building skills and of course, play with a lot of cards that you normally don't get to play with. A bonus is that these pre release events at local game stores are slowly becoming more and more like parties. At least for me locally, these events fill up anywhere between 20 to 40 plus people, and everyone is genuinely so kind. So, if you're someone who is newer to Disney Arcana, this is such a great way to meet so many more people from your local community. And I highly recommend going on the Robinsburger Play Hub to see what pre release events are happening near you and signing up. Now, this video is definitely going to lean more towards sealed format because that is my personal favorite format to play, and most of my local game stores will host sealed over draft. However, you can definitely use all the tips I shared to adjust for draft format, keeping in mind that you are adjusting your deck building plan as you pass cards versus when it's sealed, you have your whole card pool in front of you. With that in mind, let's finally dive into playing sealed. With the newest pre release kits introduced in Wilds Unknown, Illumineers can expect to open their kit and receive a cool poster, a promo card, some dice, and most importantly, 6 packs of Attack of the Vine. When playing sealed, you open all your packs, and the goal is to build a 40 card deck. Unlike normal Disney Lorcana gaming, there is no 2 ink color restriction. You're able to use all the ink colors in your deck, which could allow for some really crazy combos and creativity in deck building. As you're opening your packs, a quick tip to keep in mind to make the deck building process just a little bit easier from the get go is to sort your cards as you're opening your packs. I personally like to sort mine in piles by ink cost, so you have all your ones together, all your twos, threes, and so on. With sealed, you're definitely at the mercy of whatever cards you were lucky enough to get in your packs. Sometimes you get some really strong legendaries, other times you have a lot of rares. Regardless, you have to build a deck with what you have in your card pool. I will say Attack of the Vine is definitely up there as one of the best sets to play in Limited. There's a lot of super cool cards with even more cooler synergies and some crazy combos you could try to pull off. But if this is your first time playing Sealed, I understand that it can be really overwhelming with the decision fatigue, and it's really easy to fall into traps where you put cards in your deck that on paper sound good, but then like in your deck you're like, dang, this is not good. Or even worse, you have cards that you think altogether would work really well and like do something really cool, but because this is limited, the likelihood that you're going to see things in the order that you want to see them is pretty low. So, with this video, we're going to talk about all these different deck building strategies and traps to avoid and all of that stuff. So, yeah, let's dive in. Now, in general, to help with the deck building process in limited formats, you want to keep the acronym BREAD in your mind, which honestly is really cute because I always think of my deck now as like a little loaf of bread, and like each card is like an ingredient that I use to like make this amazing loaf of bread. Anyways, bread doesn't necessarily have this like definitive meaning for each letter. For me personally, B stands for bomb slash big bodies. R is removal, then we have evasive, approach, and draw. So I'm going to go over cards that fit in each category for each letter. And these are typically going to be pretty strong cards. I'm not going to go into every single card just because I don't want this to be really overwhelming, but you can take a lot of the information I say, and as you're opening the cards, kind of keep those tips in mind. Now, B, as I said, for me stands for bomb slash big bodies, which is essentially those really powerful cards that once you play them can create a huge impact and can essentially be game winning for you. These are also cards that have really good stats for strength and willpower. An example would be the 5 cost Lumpy, being able to move 2 damage on play, which if you play effectively could remove an opponent's he quest for 2. and has 6 willpower, which overall is really strong. Sun Yi Red Panda Spirit is another card that, if you're able to do temporary shift on 2, deal 5 damage, and then return the card back to your hand, healing all that damage, that's so strong. And then, you could do that again, potentially, if your shift target stays, or you keep that card in your hand, and that could be ink if you need it to be, or you could just play it like on 5, and that's pretty strong as well. A 5/5 that quests for 2. Peter Pan and Tinkerbell Fast Friends is also an insanely good card this set, where they give all your characters evasive. Which, once we go into E, I'll explain why that's even more important, like more than ever. We also have Maleficent and Diablo Evil Incarnate. Whether you shift this or play it on 7 ink, being able to draw additional cards on top of a 6/5 stat line is chef's kiss. R stands for removal. Anything that will help you get rid of your opponent's board while also being advantageous to you, you really want. A good example of this is Red Moon Ritual, an action song card with Sing Together 7 that will let you banish a chosen character. The 4 cost action Windstorm won't directly banish a character, but paired with some challenges, you can remove some of your opponent's characters with the ability deal 1 damage to each opposing character and location, then deal 2 damage to each opposing character with evasive and each opposing location with evasive. A 4 cost action song, Put That Thing Back, is another form of removal, but not in terms of dealing damage or banishing the character. It does, however, buy you an extra turn potentially. If an opponent just played a high cost character that quests for 2, and if they don't have ward, then you can target it and bounce that character right back into their hand, almost making that a wasted turn for them. E is for evasive. Evasives are strong in general and limited formats, but in Attack of the Vine, because evasives are so sparse, they're stronger than ever. So if you see any, you have to pick them up and put them in your deck. So that's what I mean when Tinkerbell and Peter Pan, the card that I mentioned earlier, is really strong, because if it makes so many of your characters evasive, then your opponent isn't going to have a lot of answers for that. The 4 cost Genie, Hard to Grasp, is also strong, being able to quest for 2. The 1 cost Dash, who is evasive, will also be really powerful if you're able to play it on turn 1, because there aren't that many evasive answers until later in the game, so you're probably going to safely be able to quest a couple times with Dash. Also, don't forget about cards with Alert, where the character can challenge as if they had evasive. A good example of this is the 3 cost Dr. Hamsterwheel. A stands for approach. This is a very general term that fits a lot of cards that are good on their own, but become great depending on how you build your deck. For instance, the 2 cost Violet Par is good on her own, especially having resist +1. However, if you happen to have one of the shifts, she becomes even stronger for your deck. Another card is Winnie the Pooh and Piglet Honey Mages. If you're going to be a more aggressive strategy over control, this card is definitely going to be a must for your deck. Morph Little Imitator is another card that is strong as long as you have plenty of shifts to put on top of Morph. If there's no shifts, then Morph is kind of useless. Gaston Superior Archer is another card that's pretty good on its own, but if you pair it with characters that have support and give strength to chosen character, you can do some sneaky combos with Gaston's on play ability that make him insanely strong and almost act as removal. D is for Draw. Card advantage is absolutely important in the game of Disney Lorcana. It's always the worst feeling when you have an empty hand and are top decking. So, to help prevent that, you want cards such as You Broke My Smolder, the caveat being with this card to not play too early, and instead play it when you don't have any cards in hand and then draw 2 cards. Todd Clever Fox is another really good card when you're playing this character, draw 2 cards, and then choose and discard only one of your cards. Some amazing card advantage. And if you're lucky to get the action/song with a few good friends, that's going to be such a stellar way to draw so many cards potentially, because of the text. Chosen player draws a card for each different ink type of characters you have in play, which this is limited. You play all the ink colors. So that's Bread, a basic rundown of what each letter means and some strong cards for each category. Now, let me tell you some cards to avoid that sound good in theory but actually aren't that great. As I described earlier, card draw is important, but you have to be mindful what pairs with that card draw. For instance, cards with stipulations like Doug, where when you play this character, if you have an item in play, draw a card, the likelihood of having an item in play to play Doug is low, and he doesn't have strong strats anyway, making this card pretty weak. Also, cards that allow you and your opponent to draw cards can be tricky, because you're allowing your opponent to also draw into more answers to potentially counter you. Even cards that are draw and discard are realistically just filtering your hand, which can sometimes hurt if you have a limited hand size and end up having to discard a card that you actually really wanted to keep. Cards that banish or deal damage to locations and items are cards you want to avoid adding to your deck, as most items and locations in the set aren't very strong and limited, so most opponents aren't going to really have them in your deck. So when you play them, it's just not going to be that eventful. So it's been teased a bit throughout this video, but there are some fun synergies in this set. The rule of thumb with synergies is you want to have strong cards in general that don't rely on synergies. However, if you have those strong cards and plenty of cards that support the synergy, then you can lean into that build. Think of it as like you have all these cards that build a good foundation for a house, and then leaning into the synergies is like the cute decor for the house. You also have to remember that the synergies in Attack of the Vine aren't quite strong enough yet to build a whole deck relying on synergies. So please, please, please keep that in mind. So for example, the Vinelane slash Floodborn synergy can work if you have enough. Pete, Gaston, Peter Pan, and Hera are fairly weak on their own, but if you have enough and have stronger Vinelane cards such as Hey Hey and Scar, then it might be worth putting in Pete, Gaston, Peter, and Hera to make this like team that all works together really well. And then when you look at the Hunter synergy, you have a couple really good cards like Lumpy and Christopher Robin and Winnie the Pooh and Piglet that if you have these other cards like Rabbit, Roo, Owl, and Eeyore, then they all get stronger together and might be worth adding into the deck. As you're building your deck, remember that there's an ideal curve for limited formats, which tends to go more mid range. Depending on your card pull and preferred strategy, you can lean more aggro or control, that you can change up the curve as well. I stole these numbers from my friend Heath, where in your deck building, you want to see 1 to 3 1 drops, 5 to 7 2 drops, 10 to 13 3 drops, 10 to 13 4 drops, 6 to 8 5 drops, and 2 to 5 6 and higher cost drops. If you're going more aggro, then you may want more 1 and 2 drops. And if you're going more control, you may want more 5 and 6 and up drops. And don't forget, you shouldn't have more than 6 uninkables in your deck. Otherwise, you could be punished with not being able to play anything in your hand because of too many uninkables, which I have seen happen plenty of times, including to myself. Wow, that was a lot of info. I hope this made sense, especially for beginners who may be going to their first ever pre-release or are still pretty new to playing limited formats in Disney Lorcana. I've mentioned him a few times in this video, but my friend Heath is truly a pillar in the limited community for Disney Lorcana. I'm so happy he encouraged me to make my first ever limited content this set, and if you want an even more in-depth analysis on each card in regard to limited formats, definitely check out his channel, it'll be linked below. I'm personally very passionate about playing sealed. It's one of my favorite formats, and if you want to follow along how I build my decks over the weekend and how I did at each event that I played for pre-release, definitely make sure you're following my Instagram and X account at enchanted_Kim_ to see all the fun. I hope you all have a fantastic time at your pre-release event, get amazing pulls, and I'll see you guys next time.